All right, so this week the moon is now at its final waning point, and it will be going into the dark moon on December 17th and 18th. And so when the moon goes into its darkest space, which is where the moon has the least amount of power and energy. And so many times when the moon is at the dark moon, we are kind of longing and feeling that absence of the moon energy. And we know the moon represents our minds and emotions, and we have plenty of evidence, scientific evidence that shows that the moon affects our endocrine system and our digestive system. And so we know it affects many different physiological functions in the body as well as the mind. And so when the moon is at its darkest point, we're getting that least amount of energy from the moon. And so it makes us feel vulnerable and insecure. And then when the moon is also at this point, debilitated in Scorpio, that's where we're going to feel the most vulnerable that we ever feel from the moon. And so many of us might notice that we're feeling insecure or emotional this week. And a lot of the times in our culture, we're kind of trained to if we feel bad, to just ignore it, push it away. We don't want to face it. But actually, this is a really good opportunity to really get to the root or the bottom of whatever it is that you're feeling emotionally and what some of your emotional needs are. And when the moon is debilitated and at the dark moon, this is when we want to tune in to what's going on deep inside of us, what's our emotional insecurities are, and what we need to release from our psyche. So if you really want to tap into this energy, then during Wednesday and Thursday on the new moon or the dark moon, one of those days, sit down and just meditate and allow yourself to really feel some of these vulnerabilities that have been coming up for you, maybe recently or even over the last year, and tap into what those are. And then you're going to write it down. So just a couple sentences is fine. We don't need a whole story about it. We can just write a few words like, I haven't been feeling heard, or I don't feel like I have enough confidence. So whatever it is that comes up, you're going to write it down on a piece of paper. And then you're going to take this piece of paper, you're going to stick it in a porcelain bowl, and then light the paper on fire and watch it burn. And then watch every single part of it burn, and then take the ashes and put it in a plant or offer it to the earth. And then as we enter the new moon, maybe not the day of the new moon on the 19th, but maybe the 20th or 21st, right around winter solstice, you're going to think about actually what you want to bring in, what you want to manifest. And you're going to use what you wrote down, your negative thought or your vulnerable thought, you're going to use that as your starting point. And so if your vulnerable thought was, I don't feel heard, then your emotional need is, I want to feel validated. And, or if you don't feel like you have confidence, then I am confidence, or I have confidence. And so we're going to kind of deconstruct the insecurity, and then we're going to reframe it and make it an affirmation like, I am confident, I am heard. And so it is as we become adults, it is our responsibility to fulfill our own emotional needs. And we cannot expect anyone else to do that for us. And we are the ones that need to be accountable for our own emotional needs. And so this is one of the ways that we can really understand what those emotional needs are. And then we ourselves can validate that need for ourselves. And that's really how we use the dark moon to the new moon energy. And then for this case, we're going to go from our most debilitated point in Scorpio. So really good time to get all that feedback of this is could potentially be my most vulnerable state. Where am I? What do I need? And then as we move into Sagittarius for the new moon, we'll be in the nakshatra of Mula. And Mula is the nakshatra where we're going to pull the thing out by the roots. We're going to get to the bottom of the problem. And it's kind of what this process really is. It's about getting to the root of the emotional issue. And when we go from Scorpio into Sagittarius, we're going over the Gandanta point. And Gandanta means knot. And so we're going over a knot, usually a karmic knot, and we're unraveling it. And so this is where we can really understand what this like karmic knot might be. And it will have maybe something to do with what's been making you feel insecure. And there's 3 different Gandanta points throughout the zodiac. So the first Gandanta point is when we go from Pisces into Aries. And then the second Gandanta point is when we go from Cancer into Leo. And then we're at that final Gandanta point where we're going from Scorpio into Sagittarius. And this is kind of where we go from the part of our lives that are about ourselves and the people that we brought into our life, and we get into the space of our lives where we're devoted to a higher cause. And so as we move into this next Gandanta point, we really want to pull out by the roots whatever this karmic knot is, really unraveling that knot and getting to the root of it. And so the best way to align with this energy is to really tap into what your emotional needs are. And then you're going to start to think about what you need to bring in to fulfill this emotional need for yourself. And we're not going to rely on other people for this. We're going to be the ones that fulfill our own emotional needs. And then as we move from this new moon into Sagittarius, we'll be going into the full moon in Gemini. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later.